Hello and welcome to the first in the series of our Excel seminars. My name is Owen Lynch, and in this seminar I'll be taking you through some of the key topics that if you're a daily user of Excel that you'd find yourself using but looking to use more proficiently. So what are we going to be covering in this seminar? Well, the first of our topics is our key tips and tricks. So these are tips and tricks that I've picked from classes that I run on a daily basis that generally get the most kind of oohs and ahs. The next of our content will be the likes of pivot tables, pivot charts, and a very, very useful feature that has come out now in 2010 and 2013 called a slicer. The next on the list is our table feature, again brought out in Excel 2007, and it's something I would use on a regular basis when building spreadsheets. Works very well with the likes of your pivot tables and also works in conjunction with our next topic, our V or H lookups. So what we're going to be looking at then in this seminar is how to make those lookups dynamic, but we'll talk more about those later on. The next then on the list is the if error. Now again, this was brought out in Excel 2007 and has just made working with the likes of your VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs much easier. Again, will work with most formulas out there, but just happens to work very well with the V and H lookup. And the last then on the list is a new feature that we brought out in an IACT called Tabby. I'll explain more about that later on. So let's take a look at the tips and tricks. So what are the ones that I've picked out? Well, the first one is something I would do on a regular basis, and that's being, what's the best way to navigate multiple worksheets? So there's different ways you can do it. I've picked out two very clear ones, very easy ones to use. Next on the list then is group selecting. So if you're working with multiple worksheets or multiple tables, and you want to be able to copy those tables across multiple worksheets, what's the easiest way to do that? Again, I'll show you that one. We'll also be looking at duplicating worksheets. So if I've already created a table or a list, what's the easiest way, other than trying to use the move or copy with the right-click menu, what is the easiest way to do that? Next on the list then comes the format painter. Now again, this is a tool I would use a lot in Word, I would use it in Excel, I would use it in PowerPoint. But what I find in a lot of cases is that people generally only use this to half of what it's really capable of. So today I'd like to show you its full potential. Next on the list then, we'll be looking at the auto sum. Now again, if you're already looking at pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, you already know what the auto sum is all about and the fact that it does have its own button. In actual fact, it's got two buttons. You'll find one in the Home tab and one in the Formulas tab, but I'd like to say, well look, here's the thing, you don't actually have to use either button. It does have its own shortcut key, so we'll talk about that later on. And then last on the list then is what's the best way, if I'm working with lists in Excel, to navigate that list or highlight that list. So there's a few tips and tricks. So I think I'll start with the first one now. Let's talk about navigating multiple worksheets. So I'm just going to open up my workbook here. I just have a blank workbook open here in front of me, and you can see, I haven't saved this yet, but that's not really important for the moment. When you first open up, and this is the big difference between Excel 2010 for my 2010 users, that is, and my Excel 2013, and that is the number of worksheets that open up by default. 2010, it's 3, and has been for a few years. With 2013, the default has now changed to 1 worksheet. Here's the thing. Excel, any version, allows you to have up to 255 worksheets in a single workbook. So the first thing I'd like to do is not really one of the tips and tricks, but it's just more of a setting change. I'd like to show you how to change that default. So if you said, well, on average I use 12 worksheets or 20 worksheets or all 255, what's the best way of changing the setting? And here it is. So if I go up to my File tab here in 2010 and 2013 terms, it's known as the backstage view. As you can see, it brings me into a whole new screen. If I come down to my options, which is my basic settings for Excel, I come down to options, and this will bring up my Excel options dialog box. It's here on the left. You want to make sure you've got selected, or it's selected by default anyway, general, and on the right hand side you can see it says include this many sheets. Now I did say to you that allows you to add up to 255 worksheets in a single workbook. So you can see here, if I hover over this, you can see it says enter any whole number between 1 and 255. So just for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that default from 1 to say 12. Okay. So as soon as I've then clicked on the OK button, you can see, and this is where most people panic, nothing has changed. Generally, when you make a setting change in any of the Microsoft Office products, it's the next time you go into the workbook or the document or whatever that setting will take place. So you can see, if I close out of this current workbook, File and Close, and I open up a brand new one, I'm just going to File, New, and Blank Workbook. You can see the setting has now kicked in. So I have 12 worksheets within my workbook, or any brand new workbook that I open up will have 12 as the default. Now, like I said, that's not really the tip that I wanted to show you, but I just wanted to show you that it is very easy to change the default. The tip that I wanted to show you was, well, what if you did, or potentially you had a workbook that has 255 worksheets in it? What's the best way to navigate those worksheets? So if we look at our screen again, you can see to the left of sheet 1 here, I have these navigation keys here. Now they're slightly different in 2010 and 2013. 2010 you have 4 there. 2013 we just have the 2, but the shortcut is the same for both. The next time you want to navigate a workbook that has multiple worksheets in it, come down to your navigation keys, but don't left click on them. Use your right click, and you can see as soon as you right click, it brings you up a list of all the worksheets within that workbook. I just have to select the one that I want, and you can see I can jump directly to it. So it's a much easier way than always having to scroll across, because generally when you're working with multiple workbooks, you can see, or worksheets within a workbook, you really only get to see the first 8 or 9. And that then depends on the labels that you use as well. So you can see it gets tucked under my scroll bar here. So what makes it a bit easier is the next time you're navigating your worksheets, just use a simple right click. So if I want to go back again to sheet 1, and click OK, and it jumps me right back. So that's a nice little shortcut to have for those of you that do work with multiple worksheets in a workbook. Now, as soon as I normally show that, the next question is there a shortcut version of that? Well, you know, rather than having to jump on your mouse all the time, there is. So the next time you want to move up and down your worksheets, easy way of doing this is to simply hold down your control key and use the page down to move down through your worksheets, and use the control page up to bring you back up through them. So there's 2 nice little tips the next time you're navigating your worksheets within your workbook. So if we go back to the presentation then, you can see the next of our tips then was to talk about group selecting. So I'm going to go back to my workbook here, and I'm just going to show you, the example I'm going to give you here is one I come across commonly, and that is, I want to create a nice list or table within my workbook, but I need the exact same table or list in multiple sheets of that workbook. Now what you find a lot of times is what people will do in this scenario is they'll highlight that table or list and they'll attempt to copy and paste it. Now if you've done something like that, and if you've used Excel long enough, you already know this, a lot of times your formatting or your formulas don't come over properly. So what is the best way to do it? Well, it's called group selecting, and here's how it goes. So the scenario I'm going to give you here is this. Imagine I've got a worksheet here called 2015. I'm then going to create a second worksheet here called 2016, a third called 2017, and I'll just create one more here called 2018. Now you can see here I have 4 sheets, 2015 all the way to 2018. Now I want to be able to create a table with all the formatting and all the formulas I need in 2015, but I obviously want the exact same one in 2016, 2017 and 2018. So what is the easiest way to do this? Here it is. If I select the very first worksheet here, I hold down my shift key in this case, and then I select the last sheet. What it does is it temporarily groups those sheets. Now, it doesn't really make a difference if there's 4 worksheets in that group or 44 worksheets in that group, or all 255. But what I have done here is I've selected sheet number 1, in this case 2015, held down the shift key and selected 2018. So it's now selected all sheets in that group. Now, if for whatever reason you wanted to do random sheets, Well, in that case, then you'd use your control key. But in this case, I wanted to highlight everything from 2015, 2018. Now, how you can tell is if you look at the worksheets, you can see they've got a kind of whitish color. But if you also look up at the title bar here, you can see it says group. So it's in group mode at the moment. Now I'm still in 2015. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to create a small little table, nothing too fancy here, or list. And you can see I'm going to take Jan, use my autofill to copy that across till I get as far as December. I'll put a bit of formatting on that. Like I said, nothing too fancy, just to get the point across. And what I'm also going to do here is I might as well put a nice border around this table. So I'm going to use what we call the all borders. And since I've got a nice border around my table, I might as well switch off my grid lines. And the reason why I tend to do that is I've put a nice border around the table, so I want my eye, or the eye of the user, being drawn straight to that particular table. So that's why I tend to kind of switch off the grid lines. And you can see in 2010 and 2013, it's very easy to do that. I might as well put a little formula in here, nothing too fancy. Again, I'm just going to use sum here, and I'm going to ask it to sum up any values that I put into January. Close up the bracket, and then again, I'll just use my autofill to copy that across. So you can see I've done a bit of formatting, but I've also done a simple formula, but it kind of gets the point across. Now, you got to remember, you're still in group mode. I'm still in 2015. So if I want those 4 sheets or 44 sheets to become individuals, the trick here is to select the sheet that's not part of that group. By doing that, what it does is it deselects those 4 sheets, so they now become individuals again. But there's 2015, where you originally saw me creating the table. And the great thing about this tip is, without one single copy and paste, you can see I've now got 2016, 2017, 2018, the exact same formulas and the exact same formatting, without once using copy or paste. Okay, so a very, very useful tip for those of you that are creating lists or table and you need those tables to appear in multiple worksheets. Looking at the next of our tips then, we have the likes of duplicating worksheets. So it's kind of in connection with the last tip that we've just done. So I'll go back into that workbook here. Now, I've created a worksheet for 2015, 16 and 17 and 18. What if I suddenly realize, you know what, I need 2019? Now, in most cases, if you've ever duplicated a worksheet or copied a worksheet without using copy or paste, you've definitely come across the right click on the tab and use the move or copy. Now, generally, I'm going to use the move or copy if I'm moving or copying it to another location, in other words, another workbook. So, by the way I'm talking, you can see there's going to be a much easier way to do this, and there is. If I come down to the Worksheet tab, left click on it, as if I'm about to move it, but just before I do, hold down the Control key at the same time. If I now drag that sheet across, let go of my left mouse button, but keep my finger on the Control key, you can see it automatically duplicates that worksheet for me. So now I can just come down and rename that sheet to 2019. Okay, that can also be done across workbooks too. So if I have 2 workbooks sitting side by side, if I grab that worksheet, hold down the Control key and drop it into the workbook to the right, it'll also duplicate that worksheet for me. So it's not just within the workbook, but it'll work across workbooks too. So there you have it, 2 very useful tips regards to worksheets. Let's our list. The next one we're going to take a look at here is the Format Painter. Now, what I said to you earlier on was this is one of those tools that a lot of people use, but really only use to half of what it's capable of. So let me give you an example here. So I'm going to come down to another of my sheets here. I'm just going to put a couple of headings in here. So I'm going to put in, say, Jan. And again, I'm just going to use my autofill to copy that across as far as December. Now I'll copy that and I'll put the same heading down here. So let me copy that again. So if I copy that and then I'll paste it down here, another set of headings down here. I'll even go into a different sheet and paste them in here. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is I'm going to put a bit of formatting into cell A1 here. So I want my headings to be bold. I want them to use a background color of yellow, font color of red. I want them centered and a font size of 12. Now, obviously, when I was doing that, I've forgotten to highlight the rest of my headings. Okay, so what's the easiest way of taking the formatting here and applying across the board? So without having to try and remember what I did, the easiest way to do this, and this is where most people know how the Format Painter works, click on the cell that has the formatting, come up to your Home tab, come to the Format Painter, and single click. And you can see if you look at my cursor now, it's got the little paintbrush beside it. So if I now highlight from February through to December and let go, you can see it copies the formatting across. But if you've used the format painter before, that's something you already knew. So unfortunately, where most people fall down then when it comes to this tool is this. What if they need to apply that same formatting to multiple areas? So they end up clicking back and forth to the format painter. Here's the thing. If I click on the cell that has the formatting, if I want to use that formatting once, you click on it once. If I need to use that formatting multiple times, you come up to your format painter and simply double click. By double clicking, you're telling Excel that you want to be able to use this formatting and apply it to multiple areas. And you can see I can keep applying it here. I can even go into different sheets and keep applying any workbooks I have open. I can do it across workbooks too. As soon as you're done using that tool, you click back on the format painter to switch it off, or you can hit your escape key too. Great thing about this tool is it works the exact same in Word as in PowerPoint and any of the other Microsoft Office products, the format painter. So going back to our tips then, let's take a look at what's next on the list. Well, we have what we call the shortcut key for the AutoSum. Now, a lot of you use the AutoSum, more than likely use the button on a regular basis, maybe type in the sum. So here's what I'd like to show you. What's the easiest way, what's the quick way of doing this? Now, I have a pre-prepared file that I'm just going to open up here. Here it is here, so we'll take a look at this one. Now, what I want to be able to do is work out the totals for each of the months and for the 4 products. Like I said, if you've used the AutoSum button before, you know it's in Home. There it is there. It's also found in the Formulas tab. There it is there. Because it's such a widely used button, that's why they've placed it in 2 locations. Like I said from the beginning, it's not a button I would use simply because it does have its own shortcut key. And the shortcut key for the AutoSum button, you can see I'm clicked on the total here, is Alt and equals. As soon as you hit the Alt and equals, you can see it comes up with the equals sum, asks you whatever range you want to sum up. So as we know, want to sum that up, I just have to hit the Enter key to get it to calculate, and then I can simply copy that across, and I can do then the same for product 1. Alt and equals is equals sum B2 to M2, correct? If it is, hit your Enter key, and all I have to do then is use my autofill to copy that down. Nice and easy. Okay, here's the thing. Very easy to use the AutoSum now that it has its shortcut key, but believe it or believe it not, it can get, or I can get that table done in one click or in one shortcut key. So now that you know about the shortcut key, you know it's easy just to hit the Alt and equals, copy it across, hit the Alt and equals, copy it down. But here's one for you. Now, in an ideal world, all our tables are nice, neat, small tables like this. But in real world, we know it's not always the case. But if that is, look, all I have to do is highlight all the individual values and where I want the totals to appear. And then if I hit the AutoSum button, you can see it fills all the totals in one go. So again, nice, easy little tip for you there. And the last then of our tips and tricks that we're going to take a look at is our navigating and highlighting. Okay, so what's the easiest way to navigate a list and what's the easiest way to highlight that list? So again, I'll just go back to my files here. I have a file already set up that has a bit of data in it. I'll just go into my pivot table because this will bring us back to our pivot tables here. So I open up this file here. Now, it's not a particularly large piece of data. You can see, in this case, it's only got 111 rows in it, okay? But you're probably noticing how quickly I'm able to jump around that data, especially when I'm showing users for the first time how big each of the individual worksheets are. You can see I can jump down to that 1,048,576th row without having to use the scroll bar or the roller on my mouse because, well, quite frankly, you'd be there all day trying to do something like that. So when you're working with lists, what is the easiest way to navigate that? Whether there's 100 records in it or 100,000. And that is to use the arrow keys on your keyboard. And you can see I'm currently clicked in cell A1. So if I hold down my control key and I hit arrow right once, it brings me to the last column of data. Control down arrow brings you to the last cell. So it's a nice easy way of jumping around your data. Now I know you might, if you've done stuff like that before, you might say, well, I use control home and end. And control home and end will work for you. I just find that you have that little bit more control when actually using the arrow keys. So that's the navigating side of things. What about highlighting that? Well, if I take that tip that I've just given you and combine it with the shift key. So if I do control shift, arrow right, arrow down, and you can see it's highlighted all 100 rows and all my columns from A to H. Okay, so there's two very nice, easy little tips for you. One, if you're navigating a list, what's the easiest way? Controlling the arrow keys. And then the second then is, what's the easiest way to highlight? Well, I find Control Shift on your arrow keys then to highlight. So there's our tips and tricks to start with. If I go back to the presentation, you can see here, I've gone through the navigating, the grouping, the duplicating, the format painter, the shortcut key for the auto sum, and the navigating and highlighting shortcuts.